Hello, and thanks again for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. I'm Jeff Zito. Follow on IG, celebrity_jobber_podcast. Also, youtube.com/the@CelebrityJobber. Past guests are on celebrityjobber.com. My next guest has been in the public eye since he was a kid. I guess we could call him a child actor. For many years, he was on Nickelodeon, several different shows, like The Amanda Show and Drake and Josh. It's a documentary that came out not too long ago talking about some of the scandals that went on at Nickelodeon during that time. Josh Peck, who's Josh from Drake and Josh, will tell us about how he got into the business, his big break, and his first job, plus what he's doing now. His name is Josh Peck, and my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Hello.
How's it going, man?
It's great. Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. It's so funny because my son is 24 years old, out of college, almost 25. And I remember Drake and Josh was the biggest show in his life at the time. And I'm, trying to get to know you here, look at your bio. You're a grown man. It's pretty crazy. Time flies, huh?
It does, man. I really appreciate it, though. And what can I say? I got married. I had kids. I'm doing the whole adulting.
That's awesome, man. So, if you don't mind, I'd really love to talk about your earlier life. I want to talk about your big break and maybe what you think you'd be doing if you weren't an actor, and also what you're doing today, because that's pretty important stuff, and I'm pretty interested in all of it. So, growing up in Hell's Kitchen with your mother, you were interested in comedy at an early age. What got you interested in comedy?
I think just sort of being an overweight kid who got teased a lot, I realized that life would be a lot easier if I was funny, and I could sort of control the tease and who was kind of coming after me. And then I realized I really liked it. And I grew up watching television. Television kind of raised me because I had a single mom who had to work a lot. And then I went to performing arts high school, and that was really sort of like the impetus. That was the moment that changed me forever, because I was surrounded by other weird artsy folk like me, and suddenly I realized that, you could make a living doing this thing, and you could like actually have a full life, and that it didn't have to just be a hobby, and eventually you became a doctor.
Right. Now, Josh, your mother, for her profession, she was a career coach. So did she ever kind of sit you down and say, look, son, this is a fun hobby, nice dream, but maybe we should focus on maybe a backup plan? Did she ever have that conversation with you, or was she supportive in you chasing your dream?
No, she was supportive, probably too supportive. But she was not the one to sit me down and be like, hey, maybe you should go get your business degree. Right.
So you're 13 years old. Was that your big break when you got the gig on The Amanda Show?
Yeah, that brought me out to California, and that was sort of the thing that before I was sort of doing it in a sort of tertiary, like side job, part-time job way, even though that's kind of funny to say with a 12-year-old. But when I got The Amanda Show, it brought me out to California, and I was working every day and getting to be around Amanda, who for me is one of the greatest talents ever, and just getting to watch her and see how sharp and talented she was. And she was only, about a year older than me, was really like a great mentor.
And how did you get involved in this, Josh? Because it seems like mom had a regular job, not really in show business. I mean, maybe became a showbiz parent, if you will, because of what you were doing. But was it tough for everybody to pack up, leave, and move to Los Angeles? And how did that all come about? How did you know what to do?
Who's everybody? It was just me and mom. I'm kidding. But I think that was... I think that's why we could, because there were just two of us, whereas I think you're right. Had it been a big family, I think moving cross country would have been unthinkable. But I started doing stand-up comedy in New York as a kid. There were kids' comedy shows, and my first agent was a guy named St. Gold, great guy who represented kids comedians. And so I was just doing the circuit in New York, but I started doing adult shows. They would sneak me into like the midnight show at Catch a Rising Star, so that they wouldn't lose their liquor license. I had to come in through the back door, and I would do my 5 minutes.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
So Josh, you get the Amanda Show, and everything changed for you overnight. Did everything, like, did your life change overnight when you started being a regular on Nickelodeon?
No, it just was a job. Like, and I only say that because we were kids, and it was a kids show pre-social media, so it was this amazing job that I loved doing, but it wasn't like when Stranger Things dropped.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't a cultural movement. You were on a kid show. But over time, I think people have discovered the show and loved it. And certainly to the demo that it was made for at that time, it was huge. And then as people have gotten older and their younger siblings watch it, it's sort of lasted the test of time.
I mean, and I got to tell you, I've never seen your name in the news. They always talk about child actors, quote unquote, and it's got to be tough because you're put into certain adult situations when you're younger. You could stray, you could have a couple beers, you could get arrested. You stayed on a pretty even path. Is that because was mom pretty tough on you growing up, or what?
I've been incredibly lucky to be surrounded by good people. I met my wife when I was 24, and her family's been incredible to me. And I've been very lucky in that sense. And I'm also a sober guy, and I got sober at 21. So I did sow my wild oats. I was a knucklehead for a couple of years, but luckily it was kind of at the time where people are allowed to be stupid, because it's those college years, I guess.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
Was your very first job, Josh, in show business?
Yes. I mean, I guess officially or unofficially, I used to go around raising money for the American Heart Association, but I guess I was volunteer.
Right. And then your first real job was, what was it? Was it gigging as a stand-up in New York?
It was, yeah, doing stand-up, and then eventually I did it on Conan O'Brien's show and the Rosie O'Donnell show, and yeah, it's kind of odd, but cool.
It is. Do you ever think, like, because this is a crazy business, right? Show business, crazy, and it's very, it's a dream, I mean, kids or adults dream to be a star. They dream to be famous. They dream to be in showbiz. Do you ever think about what your life might be like if it wasn't for show business? What you think you might be doing? Any kind of interests you had in high school that you think you might have gone into if this didn't work out?
Oh yeah, well, I love thinking about if I wasn't an actor. Usually when I get called that I didn't book the audition, I just worked for 2 weeks on, and I'm like in my feelings. But I play piano, and I like I mentioned, I went to performing arts high school and studied there. So I think hopefully I would be a musician or a conductor. I just love music, and I love sort of classical chamber music, but also jazz and whatnot. But I like being around people, and I love driving. I think I would be really good at driving Uber.
Really? That's interesting. Right.
I'd want to drive Uber Black though, because I'd want to be in like a big Suburban.
Right. Yeah, and you want a certain kind of clientele as well. You know what I mean? You don't want the guy calling you up at 3:00 in the morning, trashing your car, throwing up in the backseat. Nobody needs that.
Right.
Josh, you've got so much going on right now on Hulu's second season of How I Met Your Father. You've been in countless movies, Oppenheimer. I love Drillbit Taylor, by the way, one of my faves, because you played such a jerky kid in that movie. But you have a show on Roku right now, and it has to do, it's kind of a cooking competition that revolves around appetizers, correct?
It does, yes. It's called Best Bite Wins, and it's an appetizer and sort of hors d'oeuvres cooking competition. So each episode, there's a party that our 6 chefs have to cook for. There's a theme. There's certain dietary limitations. And so they have to create a bite around the party, and then the people who are attending decide what the best bite was, but also which was the worst bite and which chef has to go home.
Oh,
so
boy.
There's plenty of suspense.
So
yeah.
It's called Best Bite Wins. It's on the Roku channel. And I would have to just guess bacon has to be a very popular ingredient in the appetizers. Is that true?
It's funny you say that. I'm trying to think of it. Here's the thing. It was all because you sound like me. I was like, oh, great. Anybody who makes a pig in a blanket, they win. but these are real deal. Some are Michelin star, had worked in Michelin starred restaurant chefs. These are pros. And so they were like, oh, hell no. Like, we're doing something much more elevated. But I was the food novice. My co-host, Monty, who's a brilliant chef and food writer, she was the one who was more discerning because I just loved everything.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber podcast with Jeff Zito.
And Josh, you've gone through such a dramatic weight loss. Does this trigger any kind of feelings of, oh man, does it scare you at all that you got to be careful hosting this show? Because I mean, you have a complete transformation.
I appreciate you saying that, but I lost weight 20 years ago, and I was just a heavy teen. I just was sort of on television while I was going through that. So, of course, it's a little bit more public than for most. But
right.
No, I don't have any issues with that.
That's cool. Look, you went through such a dramatic transformation. I mean, it just, and you probably went through, being a teenager on television in front of a lot of people. But I'm just so impressed by you, your podcast, your YouTube channel. You just kind of stay ahead of everything. A new show again on the Roku channel called Best Bite Wins. Josh Peck. Really appreciate the time and good luck with everything.
Thanks for having me.
Man, really, really cool guy, I did think it was kind of sad that Josh said he wanted to get into comedy because he was overweight and maybe got picked on and made fun of. He wanted to control the T's, in his words. He just thought life would be a whole hell of a lot easier for him if he was funny. Grew up in New York City with his mother, who's a career coach, and his maternal grandmother. Never publicly identified his father, who, by the way, was a married co-worker of his mother. And Josh's birth was the result of an extramarital affair. Josh never met his father, who died, by the way, back in 2013. Yeah, that's kind of a sad story. So if it was a big family, packing everybody up and moving to LA probably wasn't really feasible. So since it was just Josh and his mother, who happened to be a career coach, it was easy for them to kind of follow his dream. And I thought it was kind of funny that with mom being a career coach, she didn't say, hey, pal, let's maybe think about this and move into a more practical direction. As Josh says, mom was a little, quote unquote, too supportive, which I thought was pretty funny. The big break, of course, getting the gig on The Amanda Show. Now, I've got a 25-year-old son, and he was all into The Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, all of those shows on Nickelodeon. So getting that gig was his big break, but I guess he didn't really know it at the time because life didn't change overnight for Josh. He said it was just kind of like a job that he loved. It seemed like fame didn't really affect him that much at that age, or at least being a star on Nickelodeon back then wasn't overwhelming to Josh. He said his first job was that of a stand-up comedian. I thought that was pretty funny, an interesting first job, performing on the Conan O'Brien show or in the comedy clubs of New York City. He said he used to try to raise money for, I believe it was the American Heart Association, but that was volunteering, so that didn't really count. I also want to point out it wasn't long ago that this docuseries came out called Quiet on the Set, and it had to do with some scandals on Nickelodeon. One in particular where Josh's co-star Drake Bell talked about being molested while at Nickelodeon, and also mentions how Josh was very supportive and has also currently reached out to Drake. And, I also want to say Josh Peck, he seems like a really good guy. He never really got into any trouble back then on that show while he was at Nickelodeon. He said he had to deal with some alcohol and drugs, back when he was in college, 2021, like when everybody has to go through stuff like that. He definitely did not go down the path like his former co-star did, Drake Bell, who struggled with substance abuse problems in his late teens or early 20s, not to mention Amanda Bynes from The Amanda Show, who seems like she's doing better but has publicly struggled for a while now. I'd also like to apologize to Josh for making the comment about his new show, Best Bite Wins, and whether or not that was a trigger for him, since he used to be so overweight and then, has pretty much gone through a complete body transformation. Seems like I might have offended him, but he said it was a long time ago when he was overweight, 20 years ago. Some of that might have had something to do with just being a kid and publicly growing up on television. So I wrote him a little note on Instagram apologizing, telling him the comment was insensitive and that wasn't the way that I meant for it to come out. And thank you once again for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast, streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Would love if you would subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Who knows about these celebrities? They weren't famous. They might be doing something entirely different. Like Josh said he wanted to be a musician or an Uber driver. I thought those two things were quite different, don't you? There you go. Until next week, thanks again for checking out another episode of Celebrity Jobber. I'm Jeff Zito.